Hey everybody, Bob Fitzgerald here in the Brave Haven Studios. Hope you guys are doing well out there tonight. Tonight we've got a special treat for you. We're not doing a live broadcast, but we had our good friend Alema Harrington come and interview the coach here in the studios a few weeks ago, and it was a treat to have Alema here talking to the coach about his life and what makes the coach tick. So I'm going to shut up and I'm going to put the interview on so you guys can enjoy this wonderful presentation of this coach, Scott Fields show. Here we go.
And welcome on in the Scott Fields show with the coach, Scott Fields. And I'm Alema Harrington. And we're just a couple of the Scott Fields show with the coach, Scott Fields. The Scott Fields show with the coach, Scott Fields. And I'm Alema Harrington. And we're just a couple of friends sitting here talking about what you've been doing, what you are doing, what the future holds for you. Let's start with this is one of the questions that I've had for you is how do you end up in Utah?
You know what? It's an amazing story. I was coaching professionally in Lebanon, and I was coaching a former University of Utah athlete, Paul Afiyaki. And
I know that kid.
Yeah, big Paul, 6'10", and we actually won a championship together out in Lebanon. And his wife is my now wife's sister.
Oh, really?
And so the introduction was made. I was actually here for the NBA Summer League with the Rocky Mountain Review, and just doing some scouting and whatnot. Paul had contacted me. His sister Holly had mentioned several times, "Hey, you should meet my sister. You guys would, get along great. You guys are both physically fit. You're active." And it's just crazy because I thought, okay, that'll never happen because we're in Beirut, Lebanon, of all places. And I thought, okay, when would I be going out there, or when would I ever see her? But so we'd never seen each other, and finally we made connections and stuff, met and fell in love with her, and here we are 8 years later, and we're in Salt Lake City, Utah, and now doing the Coach Scott Fields show.
Things that we do for love. Probably one of the best decisions you ever made. Number one, to marry Kim. And then secondly, to be here in Utah because we benefit from you being here. But let me ask you about this. You're a kid from Indiana.
That's right.
So tell me about growing up, and did you ever imagine that someday I'll live in Utah? Maybe the only thing you knew about Utah was the Utah Jazz. I don't even know what it was. But what was it like growing up for you?
You know what? Growing up in Indiana was awesome. I was very blessed with a lot of athleticism before my coaching career. I was actually a Hall of Famer at my high school. Played football. Started as quarterback of the football team all years in high school. Of course, my passion was the basketball. I loved to play. Actually set some school records in track, in long jump, also the 100-meter dash, the 200. It was just a great place to grow up and have a childhood. And from that, I accepted a scholarship to go down and play basketball in North Carolina, and that's where my journey takes a little bit of a twist. Alema, it's I look back at it now, and it was all a test, and it was growth and maturity. But to accept my scholarship in the state of North Carolina, I had to take an oral polio vaccine. The state of Indiana's education didn't require it because I already had my measles, mumps, rubella, and all those inoculations that we have to go through our schooling. And it came up that I needed another polio vaccine to accept my scholarship. So it was probably in October of 1986. I'm already playing in school and, had things going, and I get this call and they said, "Hey, for this paperwork to go through for your scholarship to pay for your schooling, you have to have another inoculation." So they send for me to go to this hospital in Asheville, North Carolina. I take this oral polio vaccine, and that caused my immune system to go awry. And after taking that inoculation, I started noticing that I was having pains that before, as an athlete, you're an athlete yourself, you know how you endure, you have a high threshold of pain, and nothing would ever stop you. Because I even played football one game where, again, I was quarterback of the football team, had broke my ankle, but homecoming game was coming up my senior year. I broke my ankle. They casted it up. I still played, but they moved me out to wide receiver, and we still had 2 touchdowns. So if a guy can play with pain like that, I couldn't figure out why these pains that I was having now, I couldn't get that out. I couldn't get through that, and it was getting worse and worse. Get to where my knee was getting as big as a cantaloupe. Couldn't lift my leg into the shower after practices. My hands were starting to swell. I couldn't lift my right arm, and I continued to get worse. And I came home back to Indiana from North Carolina. Scared was what I was.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what was going on with me. I didn't know why I couldn't fight through the pain. Went through a lot of doctoring, and they actually sent me to the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. And we were still trying to find a diagnosis. We didn't know if it was lupus. We didn't know if it was like the Lyme disease that people get from a tick. And of course, with us being in North Carolina, being out in the mountains, they thought, hey, it could have been a Lyme disease. Well, come to find out, at the Mayo Clinic, they said, well, you've got rheumatoid arthritis. Well, it didn't make sense because no one in my family even had any form of arthritis. No one in my family had any form of gout. And when you look at rheumatoid arthritis, it's 98% in female, and I am not a female.
Right.
So all these questions kept coming up. What is going on? And the factor would be there in the blood work one time. The next time the factor wouldn't be there. And through all the research and all the things that came out, they're like, well, no, you have the crippling arthritis. And we're sitting there with the doctors, and my father took off work to come to this doctor's appointment up at the Mayo Clinic. My mom was also sitting there, and the doctor comes in, and this is probably after 2 days of testing, and they said, hey, you need to be prepared that you do have rheumatoid arthritis. It's the crippling form of arthritis. And at the time, I already had a lot of deformities, and of course, I was having so much pain. I probably got down to, I think, 113 pounds because all of my joints were completely frozen. And I was bedfast for pretty much 9 months, where my mom would actually have to come in and turn me in my bed. So you go from a Hall of Fame athlete at your high school to being bedridden and can't squeeze a tube of toothpaste, couldn't zip my pants. I couldn't really have a normal function of life. They said, you need to be prepared that you'll probably be in a wheelchair at the age of 25. And of course, I looked over at my parents because, when you're 18, 19 years old, you don't want to hear that, your life or the better part of your life, you're going to be spent in a wheelchair. And I remember looking over at my mom, and I was like, they don't know me very well, do they? And, it was frustrating. It was hard. It was challenging. Had to go through multiple surgeries on different joints so that the multiple medications, because I can remember one time being, taking 16 pills a day to try to find something that would give me relief or some kind of comfort, just so I could have any kind of quality of life or even function, or even be able to sit in a chair comfortably for 2 hours to complete my degree in college. And I've got to admit, it was hard. It was a challenge because I didn't want to accept that, I could no longer play the game that I loved. And, trying to figure out a way to get healthy. I can't thank my family enough because they were supportive, and thank goodness that I was able to be covered from insurance with my father with his job. That's how we was able to finance those things. But then we had one knee surgery, then it turned into another knee surgery, and then that turned into a third knee surgery. It was a challenging, tough time. But I always knew that if I couldn't play the game, I wanted to be involved and give back to the game that was so good to me, because playing basketball in the state of Indiana, it's like a religion. I mean, and I played in Indiana basketball when there was no classification. There was no 1A, 2A, 3A. It was just like the movie Hoosiers that you see, where it's the small little country school versus the big city school, and that's the environment that I grew up in, and I loved it. So I knew I wanted to get back and be in the game and coach, because I can remember also while I was playing, probably like my sophomore, junior year, I'd be sitting up till 2 or 3 in the morning on a coffee table with coasters, and I was diagramming to my mother. Who I say, hey, we're running a 2-1-2 trap. Why wouldn't we be breaking it like this? So I was always analytical, and I was always trying to figure out ways to break things down or do things better. And I thought, if I can teach my mom how to break a press, I think I could do this for a living and teach and be a coach. And I was blessed that when my playing career came to an end, Alema, the guy that I played my college basketball for, he opened his arms and said, hey, he knew I wanted to get into coaching, and he allowed me to come finish with him. Here I was, only 19 years old. I was a full-time college assistant coach as I completed my degree, and my career has kind of taken off from there. So that's a long-winded question, but one thing led to another. I'm coaching at the college level. We've had success. We was recruiting, national rankings, coaching players of the year at different levels. And the opportunity came up to coach professionally overseas in Europe. And I wanted to be a head coach, so I took my very first head coaching job at the age of 28, and we had great success.
It's interesting because you did mention that you knew that this was a test. and even looking across at your parents when you're getting the diagnosis, and that your response is, they don't know me that well, or obviously they don't.
Well, I just couldn't see myself
Right.
being in a wheelchair at the age of 25.
And I would say part of the reason why you're not in the wheelchair is because you couldn't see that.
Right.
And so I look at your career now, and I wonder, and I think you always wonder what would have been if the High School Hall of Famer, right, had gone on and played his college ball, and then maybe even gone on to the NBA, and then maybe you miss what your true calling is, which is to be a coach. Have you ever looked at it from that standpoint?
I have many times, because you got to understand, at 18, 19 years old, we're all very egocentrical, and it's always about me, 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 even though we don't realize it. Of course, it's easy for me to say that now at age 47. But, at age 19, you're like, why me? Why is this going on? I always made great decisions. I had a good, healthy lifestyle. I took care of myself. I trained hard. It was just my dream to play college basketball. And we got to that level. And things were going well. I mean, I can remember setting a school record for the amount of assists in a single game. Having a double-double, in that same game. And some good schools, recruiting. And I don't know what would have happened. I'm sure, looking at it now, because of the path in my journey, I would have never met and fell in love with my wife, which, like you said, is the best thing that's ever happened to me, because now I've got a great daughter in Whitney, and we have Brandon in our life now. So I am blessed with all the things that have happened, and I'm grateful. And and because of that journey, I mean, I've been able to coach in Europe. I've been able to coach in Latin America. I've been able to coach in Asia. I've coached in the Middle East. I've coached in the NBA Summer League. Coach Sloan here with the Utah Jazz allowed me to come in when I was between jobs to observe and kind of consult with him, and learning and watching a Hall of Famer like Jerry Sloan for 2 years. Man, I was soaking that up like a sponge, because how could I not benefit from watching, a quality coach like that? So I've still been blessed and fortunate after all those, tests.
Well, what was the turning point for you? And you talked about, the diagnosis and the prognosis, which is not good.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at you today, and I would think that most people would say this looking at you today, as a guy that suffers from rheumatoid arthritis. I never would have known. People would never would have known your story. So what happened from the swollen joints, multiple surgeries, to where you are today?
You know what? I think having faith. First I was angry, because I was like, why would a God do this to me? Why am I suffering? Again, it's that selfish thing that we have when we're 18, 19 years old, and you just want to play, and you're living the dream, because 16, 17 years old, all you think about is you're playing high school basketball, you're playing football, you're getting offers from different schools, and you're like, I just want to go play. And when that comes to an end, you're like, okay, what am I going to do? And I think being hard-headed, I've been labeled that a lot from my mom. Hey, Scott, you're hard-headed. But I think if I wasn't stubborn and hard-headed and had faith, and they made so many sacrifices to make sure that we found the right doctors to try to find comfort and care so I could have any kind of relief. Because, again, I was pretty much bedfast, because I had the in-bedroom in our home. And from the bedroom to the bathroom would probably actually only be about maybe 10 steps maximum, but it would take me 25, 30 minutes to get from the bedroom to the bathroom, because I couldn't move. I mean, my family having to come and roll me over, get me up, get me to a position, get me stood up, walk me to the bathroom. That was a challenge. I think mental toughness was a lot of it. And like I'm saying, I was angry because I couldn't figure out why I had to suffer that way. I didn't see the big picture. I didn't know. Of course, we're still figuring that out. We're all on our own journey. We all have a story. We all have a path. That just happens to be my path. And I think being fortunate enough that my family made the sacrifices to find the quality doctoring for me, I was able to find this great specialist in Indianapolis, Indiana. And I actually, who did the surgeries, was the doctor who did all the doctoring for the Indianapolis Colts. So we knew we were getting quality care. And, trying to find the right cocktail of medication to give me relief just so I could even function was the first step in that process. And then once I started getting to where I could at least almost squeeze a tube of toothpaste and take care of myself and have those skills back, it was just a matter of me saying, I'm going to beat this. I'm going to do better. I'm going to do something with my life. I'm not going to sit here in a bed. I'm not going to be in a wheelchair. And I really think just being stubborn and hard-headed had a lot to do with that. But faith, pulled me through a lot of that.
There's got to be an understanding that there is some higher purpose for all
That's
of
right.
this. And I talk oftentimes about the why me progression, which goes from why me victim
That's right.
to why me inquisitive,
Sure.
which is where you finally got
That's
to
right.
after we're all in that selfishness place, right?
Yeah.
It's like, why is this happening to me?
Yeah.
And there's no that's a rhetorical question. I'm
Sure.
not looking for an answer. I'm looking
Yeah.
for you to just sympathize with me and just
Yeah.
tell me, your life is really bad. And then I get to why me inquisitive. I'm asking, God, really, I'm curious. Why is this happening? Show me.
Right.
And I think that's where you were. And then eventually we get to the highest progression, which is why me grateful. Like,
That's
wow.
right.
Now looking back on it, that you almost feel blessed that you were able to
That's
go
right.
through that.
That's right. I've never met my wife. I wouldn't have had all the journeys and experienced the cultures and the currencies and all the different religions. And I feel so enriched to have all that global travel within my resume as a coach and the success because I got to practice my philosophies on the court with these players that wanted American coaching and they were thirsty for it. And they had such great work ethics and we had success and we'd won championships and that was all again part of that progression of the coaching. And as I sit before you now, now we host the Coach Scott Field Show where we're trying to empower and educate and help other coaches and players grow within their progression with wherever they're at in their journeys, and it's been fun. But I do believe that in the right place and the right time, I think my best coaching days are still in front of me. I really do.
And I think that there is great purpose for everything that is happening right now to prepare you for whatever
That's
that
right.
coaching job is
That's
on
right.
the other side. When you're sitting down with these young athletes and working with them, what's that experience like for you? Because you talked about that time that you're at the kitchen table or wherever with mom and you got the coasters and you're diagramming
Right.
this stuff.
Right.
As you've taken that to the next level with these players, what's that like? First of all, from from a cognitive standpoint, the ideas generating in your
Right.
mind, and then being able to coach that and then see it come to fruition
Right.
on the basketball court.
Right. I sit there and I watch today. It doesn't matter what level, what gender, what age group that you work with. The most effective coaches are the ones that can effectively communicate and identify roles and teach. The best coaches are the best teachers. I don't care if we're talking about Jerry Sloan. I don't care if we're talking about Greg Popovich. You look at Larry Brown, who's had success at the NCAA level and again at SMU with the 76ers and the multiple stops. But they've had success in every stop that they've made for a reason because they're great teachers. And I think for any coach, if you don't have a philosophy, you don't have a foundation to build from. And we've always had a philosophy, and we'd go try to find the right players to fit that philosophy, and then you teach, and then you show, and you demonstrate, and you explain exactly what their role is going to be. Because I watch a lot of teams now, and sometimes you don't see teams that have identities, and I don't think roles have been discussed to players because there seems like there's confusion on what they need to be doing, or maybe that's just a competitive nature, or maybe they're getting outside influences, in their ear. But I think the ability to teach is the biggest part to have success as a coach at any sport, at any level, with whatever gender you're doing. And I think the more that you can have those close interpersonal relationships, you get to know that individual, you find out what buttons to push at the right time. Just like, not long ago, Quinn Snyder is coaching right here at the Utah Jazz, and he saw the team struggling. He goes out there and he gets them fired up, let's go. And he gets it technical. Well, just him knowing the team and the team's body language, they were able to respond from that, and it worked, and it's effective. But again, those come from the relationships that you have, and working and knowing your age, knowing your talent that you're working with, and having those relationships to know some people need a little bit more of a pat on the back, and some need more of a kick in the tail. And once you know that individual, you know which buttons to push. But that comes from hours of, spending time with an individual, knowing, maybe their backgrounds, where they come from, their environments. And I think when the coaches are smart enough to put all those things together and work with one individual, then you build that chemistry with all 12 of those players to get them to function the way you want. And as a coach, it's so fun to sit there and diagram a play, and then you, like you say, go out there and watch it. It's like Picasso and his canvas. It's now coming to fruition. It's like, I told you, there it is. And then when the players see it, and then they're buying into what you're doing, and they have success from it right away, bang, things just take off. And then the energy and the enthusiasm and the passion, that all builds a life of its own because the roles have been identified and everybody knows what their job is, and they stay in their lanes. They do what they're supposed to do. And it's the same for a coach. If I'm a coach and I have my weaknesses, I go get assistant coaches whose strengths are what my weaknesses are. So together, combined, we're a strong team and a strong unit as a staff, and we constantly, with a positive reinforcement and a positive attitude, we get that message out to the players every day.
Yeah,
That's the key.
I think that we're getting a lot of it just from hearing you talk about it. But you said, if a coach doesn't have a philosophy, then you don't have a foundation.
That's right.
What is the coach Scott Fields' philosophy? If you can share some of that, you don't have to divulge maybe any trade secrets necessarily.
Yeah.
But if I were going to ask you, what's the Coach Fields' philosophy? What is it?
You know what? It's about doing it with passion and doing it for the right reason. I'm passionate. I'm compassionate, and I think those are components that are important. And I think that you have to have the credibility, and you earn that credibility and respect by showing. It's not just always talking. I think too many times, sometimes coaches can overcoach. And they'll overcoach because they're trying to do too much. Well, if you teach and you show them what you want, you can sit back and then the players will do it. You have to have faith in that player to give them that role responsibility to go get that job done. And if there's a disconnect in that, that's what you have to work on first, because these small things become big things in a hurry. And we can all sit back and remember experiences, or maybe as a player or as coaches, but I'm going to treat a player just the way that I wanted to be treated myself. I'm not about embarrassing anybody. I'm about positive reinforcement. I'm about, hey, this is what you can do. Now, if you make a mistake, we're going to correct it, but we're going to do it in a classy, professional way that way everybody knows and understands. A player doesn't need to be embarrassed, in front of 20,000 people. You don't have to yell and scream and demean a person, because you're going to see their body language go down. First of all, when a player makes a mistake, they know they made a mistake. They don't need a grown man screaming at them in front of 20,000 people when already their ego is going to be a little bit hurt because they've made a mistake, and now a grown man is yelling at them, telling them they made a mistake. You see their body language start to slump. And when I try to be so in tune with the players that I'm watching their eyes. I know when someone understands me when I'm in a huddle. That's why I put my point guard directly in front of me, because he is the extension of me on the court. So in my huddle, I design point guard is in front of me, my two bigs, my 4 and my 5 are next to my point guard, and I book in it with my 2s and my 3s. But I need to make sure my point guard knows and understands exactly what I want when we come out of that timeout. And all those little things that we're talking about are small details that I pay attention to, and I think those small details bring us success. But that's not just all the philosophy. Those are just like little key points, because we could sit here and talk for hours on certain aspects like that. But I think that's why the Greg Popoviches are, successful. The Jerry Sloans could have longevity in his career the way that he did here for more than 20 years, because they and their staffs pay attention to those details.
Yeah. Scott, you talked a little bit about your family growing up and how important they were, the support that you had, the determination that they had to find the right doctors, and make sure that the diagnosis was right, and then the treatment was proper for your success. I'm interested in how important that was for you then, and how you've built that in your own life today with Kim and your family, and how important that family support is. I think you experienced that growing up, how important that was, and now you have built that in your own personal family life.
Yeah, well, you know what? First and foremost, choosing the right wife is big. And I'm lucky that Kim is so supportive with all my career endeavors and my dreams. And I mean, she's watched me get my passport stamped and take off and make sacrifices to leave to be away to chase this dream and build the resume and do the things that we do. So first and foremost, having that solid relationship with her and having the love and support from her, it has been vital. And watching my grandparents, watching my mom and dad, and seeing the love that they've always had, that's something that I always wanted. So trying to be patient. And many years I was a single bachelor, traveling the globe. But I don't know, when I met Kim, I knew there was something special there. And we did have so many things in common that we could sit there and share. And I didn't have kids, but now we have Whitney, and now we have Brandon, and which those are stories in themselves. But to have that family foundation and the love and the communication and the open dialogue, but it all comes from love, and and that's a good thing. And again, I'm blessed with that. I really am.
A lot of people will say that parenting is a lot of coaching.
Oh,
I mean, you are doing a lot of that
every day.
And Brandon, who's off on his own journey now, playing some basketball.
That's right.
And even with Whitney and going through her or helping to raise her.
Yeah.
What's that been like how has your coaching helped you as a parent?
I think just because to have patience, and I think a lot of coaches, we live in this microwave society, and we all want results too fast, and we don't want to take our time through the process. And the Utah Jazz are a perfect example of that right now, because it's a process to build, and we got a young core, and we have to be patient. And we as fans who love the Utah Jazz have to be patient to allow that process, to come to fruition. And I think being patient, to sit back, to be able to listen. I think listening is a skill set. And if we don't listen, I mean, we hear things every day, but when you listen, you learn. And we've done speaking engagements together where I talk about, the importance of listening. And I think if we as parents and we as coaches will take the time to listen, I think we become better, because before you can be a good leader, you have to be able to be guided. And a lot of times the answer is right in front of us. If we take the time to open our minds and to listen, bang, things will just go. And with Whitney, I came into her life when she was 17. And of course, we've gone through a few boyfriends together, but I always just tried to be there to guide and support, and I'd always answer questions for her if she would ask. But she was so strong and independent because she's like her mom that she pretty much knows what she wanted. So Whitney was easy, but Brandon was always a lot of fun, because our first bond, when he came into our lives, I just came back from coaching in China, and a colleague of mine said, "Hey, there's this young man who's always carrying a basketball." And he says, "You're a basketball guy, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He says, "Hey, you need to meet this guy." And so this innocent little guy who weighed probably 100 pounds, he had his little basketball shorts on, his socks and his t-shirt, carrying a basketball. And I introduced myself to him, and he was playing in the super leagues here in Utah with the AAU. So here he is, this little 13, 14-year-old guy. So I started going to his games, and I remember going home to my wife one night. It was a Wednesday night, and I told her I was going to be coming home late. And I came home and I said, "Babe, there's something special about this kid." I said, he's got a passion for the game. And I said, "I love that." And then next thing you know, he's now in our life full time, and he's the son I've always wanted but never had. And like you said, he's playing down at Price at USU now, and he has a game this weekend that we can't wait to go down and go support him, because he's that little point guard that, I mean, you can tell he's a coach's son, because he's been around it and heard all the talk, and I got to coach him in AAU, and to see where he's at now, and just, before we were talking about body language, seeing, he's had the support systems, like I said, that I had growing up. Kim has been so loving and nurturing and supportive, and, he was able to receive that, and his confidence has grown so much, because when we first met him, he was kind of, 14 years old. Kids don't have a lot of confidence anyway. They're trying to find their way, but now his shoulders are back, and he's kind of proud, and he might weigh 140 now if we put rocks in his pocket, but he thinks he's buff and cut up and strong, so he's feeling good about himself right now. We're proud of him.
Yeah. You take a look at the different journeys or paths that we take in life, and for you, great success overseas, and just in coaching in general. How does this come about? Talking about the Coach Scott Field show.
Yeah.
You mentioned that it's about motivating, inspiring coaches.
Yeah.
And what made you decide to do this?
It's amazing. A great friend of mine who I was able to meet through coaching. There was a small minor league team that was here, and we were going through a free agent camp, and I met the guy who owns Brave Haven Studios, Bob Fitzgerald, sitting behind the cameras now. And he approached me a couple years ago and asked, he's like, "Hey, Coach, we ought to do us a show." And I ran away from it, because I was so intimidated by it, because I'm like, I'm just a coach. You put me on the floor and you give me a basketball and you give me a team with some players, that's my comfort zone. I didn't know how comfortable I'd be sitting on this side of the camera, just sitting talking with friends that I've met through the years and trying to get the right stuff out of them. And I thought, you know what? If this is my way to prove that everybody always say, hey, you're a player's coach, or hey, you're a coach's coach. Well, this was my chance to have the vehicle to prove that we can teach coaches how to be better coaches. We can teach players how to be better players. And I'm so glad and thankful that I met Bob and that he introduced this idea to me a few years ago that, here we are now. We've had our first season of our show. I don't know all the demographics, but I mean, it's national and international podcasts that we've had over 20,000 views, just in our first year. And we're excited to get the second year started. And this is kind of what this show is going to do, to let people kind of get more of a feel of who I am and what I'm about and why I'm so passionate about doing this, so that we can teach coaches to be better coaches. And the success that we've had the first year, it's humbling, because I couldn't believe that sitting in a little studio in Salt Lake City that we would get hits and views from, of course, China and Lebanon and Nigeria and the Philippines and Ghana and Israel. And it's like, wow. I mean, so evidently we're doing something right. So we want to continue to grow that product and our brand and to get that out there. And if this is the plan and the path that God has for me, why not try to be the best at it? And that's another philosophy of mine. If you're going to do something, try to be the best at it. So, of course, I'm watching shows like yours, where I got to be a guest on your show, or you watch a Dan Patrick and you see the ESPNs and the Sports Centers. But I thought, even when a coach moves over that one seat, he's still got to do it his way with his own personality. And that's what I want to do with this show, is still show that passion, have that energy, have that enthusiasm, still teach, guide, and direct. I'm just coaching in a different way until the good Lord blesses us to have an opportunity to go beyond a sideline somewhere, working with players and help them develop, to help them achieve their goals.
One season in the can, so to speak, as we say in the broadcast business, right? And so for those that are tuning in and they're seeing this for the first time, like, man, Coach Scott Fields, man, it's got me a little bit fired up. What can they expect in the upcoming season?
Yeah.
What did you guys do last season? Drop some names. Don't be afraid to drop some names here, because you've had some big names on this program, and people are thinking, it's a podcast. I don't know, who's going to be on the program. But you have built relationships over the years, and your resources, the access that you have is really pretty special.
Blessed.
Talk about what you and Bob go through as you're preparing a show, one of your shows, and then some of the guys that have been on this program already.
Yeah, well, in our first season, and again, blessed beyond words to have great friends. I mean, such as yourself. I mean, look at us today. We're sitting here, you and I are having dialogue and talking about things that we both are passionate about. I mean, to me, you're one of the best in this market that we have to, do what you do as a sportscaster and broadcaster. And I have been a sponge and soak that up. You've been on our show. Big T, Thurl Bailey, was on our show last year, who you also do some work with, that lives here in the Salt Lake Valley. But hearing his journey, playing for Coach V and Jimmy Balvano. I mean, you see the 30 for 30 on ESPN. He got to play here with Coach Jerry Sloan, a Hall of Fame coach. He has kids himself. We've had Terry Porter, who played in the NBA Finals against a Michael Jordan, who was an NBA All-Star. We've had Sidney Moncrief, who I got to do some work with the Golden State Warriors. Former head coach Keith Smart, who's now with the Miami Heat, who's going to be here on the 12th of December. He was on our show. But to hear a Keith Smart sit on the show and talk about how much he looks forward to being home and praying with his boys by his bed before he puts into bed, you don't hear that on any other show. And that's some quality content and insight and some background that our guests are able to open up casually and just talk like you and I are today, that people get to see a different side. Now, is the Coach Scott Field show coach-driven? Yeah, because it's from a coach's perspective, and which gives us a different look than some other shows that are out there. But I think that can be a positive if we use it in the right way. We've had Frank Layden. Again, we all know Frank here from the Valley. He had some great stories. I mean, from all the time from he coached in high school in the city leagues in New York. We've had Pete Babcock, a former front office guy who had success with the Denver Nuggets and the Atlanta Hawks, who's now a scout with the Cleveland Cavaliers. The list has gone on. We had players that were between contracts in free agency. Ronnie Price, a former Jazz guy who lives here in the Valley, he was a live in studio guest. A few weeks after he's on our show, he's with the LA Lakers. We had Anthony Tolliver, who I got to coach At an NBA charity event when the NBA lockout was on, we built a great relationship. He was with the Charlotte Bobcats as a number 7 seed, got to play with Michael Jordan on his team, and he comes in and he shares insight. Well, he gets signed with the Phoenix Suns. So I don't know if our show had anything to do with that. Maybe some general manager out there watched it, thought, hey, these guys are quality guys, and it provided them an opportunity. But we're glad that we could be a vehicle for other players to hear them in their journeys because, again, they had different journeys, small schools, mid-major schools, to undrafted, to being invited into a camp. Great stories, and what better people to learn from other than your peers if you really listen to their journey, because there's other people out there who are going through the same journey. Gosh, so many other guests that have been on, and we've already started lining up guests for this year that are going to be as good as last year, but we have changed the format. Last year we had an extended format. This year we're going to condense it to where it's just going to be a 1-hour show. We've added to our team. We've got some sponsors. We got team leads that are out there soliciting for sponsorship so people can use our show as a vehicle to get promotion and marketing for their brand, and we hope we help them grow as we grow, and that's exciting for us. So we've got those team leads. We're going to have a show blogger this year, so we're making small things because it was just Bob and I moonlighting this, trying to do it all. And there's, like you've done shows like this yourself. There's a lot of hours of preparations and scripts and contacting the guests and bring logistics to have the guests come here. I think I gave Thurl the wrong address last year, and he was out on 9th West or something. So 10 minutes before the show, we're like, Bob, fire that guy. And he's like, I can't. It was you. so I mean, we've got fun stories like that too. But it's a work in progress, and we're learning from our mistakes, and we humbly accept those things. And it's going to be even better this year than it was last year. So thank goodness for those mistakes that we've made, because we're finding out things that are going to work better for us this year.
Yeah, I think what always comes back, or at least as I listen to you, Scott, it always comes back to that there's a reason for all of these things, whether it's Thurl being at the wrong address, or a camera going down, or the audio's not working right, or something's going on. If you can maintain that mentality of what is the reason for this? The why me progression, of being in that inquisitive, at least being in the inquisitive, and get out of that why me at the bottom, which is why me victim. Why me, that cursing the heavens.
Yeah.
Then you're always on your path to finding purpose.
There you go.
Or what this experience is doing to fulfill your purpose.
But you know what? It's all about that attitude, Alema. I mean, we can all sit there in every situation in our life, no matter what curveball is thrown at us. We can make it a living purgatory. I mean, we can. Or we can say, okay, I'm going to take what's been given to me, and we're going to make the best of this situation. And not only with our lives, but with this show and every step in our journey, all of us as individuals, as we go through our journey, it's about our attitude and what positive twist that we can put on it. And I'll be the first to tell you, I am far from perfect. I'm probably not the easiest guy to live with. And, we come on this show, and it's the energy and the enthusiasm. Yeah, there's still that part of me that's so competitive, and I see my friends coaching on the sidelines, and I'm like, I'm happy for them. I'm not hating, but I'm like, boy, I know if given that opportunity, I'm going to be doing just as well. So I'm being patient for that opportunity to come. And again, I've got a long way to go, but I'm better today than I was yesterday.
One of the things that, as I've been here and I've been on this show and watching Bob in the background, and there's interaction going on.
Yeah.
People can interact with the program.
Yeah.
And I'm curious from your experience, what's been some of the interaction that you've got that's both entertaining and like, wow, we really had an impact on this person, because I know that stuff comes in, whether it be via Twitter or other social medias.
Right. Well, we have done our own self-promotional stuff through social media, but receiving the text messages after a show where a parent will actually text me and be like, Coach, I don't know what you're doing, but my son who's 15 years old watched that show for 3 hours straight, and he was glued to the laptop. That makes you feel pretty good that the message that's being given, if the individuals who are watching the show at the time, if they took 3 hours from their day, wow, we must have been doing something right. So that's why we want to do something even better this year, that we don't want that full 3 hour format. We're going to condense it to an hour, and we're going to cram, a certain subject or topic within that show, and we're gonna pound on that topic for that specific show for that 1 hour. But yeah, receiving messages, different things coming through on Facebook, man, they've been so humbling. And again, when we go back and look at the demographics, and we look at the show after it's been archived, and we see the different countries that have viewed your show, it's like, oh my goodness, there's people from Israel watching the show when Israel is right in the middle of war. So maybe we were giving them a little bit of refuge or entertainment or something to get their mind off of what was going on within their bad day. It makes you feel pretty good about what you're doing, because obviously there's a basketball fan or player or somebody out there, maybe it was a general manager or something that was maybe learning from Frank Layden, or maybe someone who knew Thurl watching him play in the championship in 1983, remembered him running around there all skinny with the short shorts on like John Stockton, and said, hey, I want to watch Thurl Bailey. So it's fun to get that feedback. And I can even remember when Everett Gray, who lives here, who played for Jerry Tarkanian, that was when the Donald Sterling stuff was going on. And Everett had some interesting insight because he knew Donald, because he did some stuff with the Clippers. And then the amount of hits that we had received right after that show, it's like, well, we weren't trending, but our finger was on the pulse. And so we want to make sure that we continue to do that as we grow into season 2.
Scott, you talked about growing up in Indiana and about family. And we have so many influences that come from our family and
Right.
our dads.
That's
right. Our
right.
fathers, right? Your father spent some time coaching you growing up. How much
Yeah.
influence did that have on you? Not just then, but even now.
Yeah. You know what? I was lucky that my dad took the time to, be one of my coaches from a young age. I mean, in youth football, when I was quarterbacking, he was always out there coaching me in football. He was also coaching me in baseball. So my 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12-year-old year, my dad was my coach in baseball, and we had a lot of success. I mean, we threw no-hitters in baseball as a pitcher, made the all-star team, had the highest batting average, home run king, all that kind of stuff. I was blessed with so much talent, but my dad constantly pushed me, and he challenged me, and he didn't let me accept mediocrity. I mean, if I was going to do it, he challenged me in his way with his personality to be the best. And if I struck out, why did I strike out? Was I dipping my shoulder? Did I not keep my eye on the ball? So again, here he was teaching me these little details that I was angry at him at the time, because here I am 9 years old. I'm walking to the dugout crying. I struck out. And here's my dad. Why are you striking? You dipped your shoulder. And what do you mean I dipped my shoulder? Then he'd show me, well, you dipped like this when you stepped into... well, yeah, daggone it. I didn't want to hear it, but he was right. But again, it was that influence and him constantly teaching and pushing me and challenging me that has gotten me to this point of where I am today. Because there are times now, here I am 47, or maybe I'll say something to Brandon, I'll be like, wow, that was my dad. So that influence has always been there. And I appreciate that, because he did take the time to spend with me, because a lot of times there's split homes and fathers don't have the time to spend with their sons, and there's a lot of fathers out there who don't take the time to spend with their son. But I do remember him. I mean, it didn't matter, because after a baseball game on a Friday night, we would take off and we'd be camping all weekend up at this little lake, and then it was just father-son. We're out there in the boat fishing for largemouth bass, the panfish, the crappie, the bluegill, doing some swimming, sitting around the campfire. And to have those bonds, I mean, I knew he loved and cared for me, and I don't think my dad lived vicariously through me, but he was a good athlete himself before he had to take on the responsibility of raising his family, because his father passed away at 15 years old when they had bought his first car, and he actually passed away of an aneurysm underneath that. And I remember my dad telling me those stories. And so just the fact that he took the time with me for all those years to spend with me and to coach, it helped me become who I was, because I didn't accept anything but the best, and I wanted to keep on pushing myself and challenging myself. And it didn't matter if it was a basketball game. He was at every basketball game through, grade school, elementary school, high school. I mean, he worked midnights at a factory at Chrysler Corporation, but yet he would be at that game, go to the game, and then leave right after the game, grab a quick bite to eat. Then he'd go work from 11 to 7, and then try to catch a nap while I was at school. Then he'd be there for the next practice or game. But he was always there, and I'm appreciative of that. And I've tried to do the same thing with Brandon. and coach him in his AAU and hope that helped, because we made sacrifices as parents to try to help the kids reach the goals that they wanted to reach. I didn't force Brandon, that was his love, so it was great that we had that bond, but just like for my father, he was able to do that for me. Yeah. So I'm lucky. I was lucky in that.
You know, I think about our relationship, and when I first brought you on Powerhouse, there's plenty of guys out there, you know, that have insight. You can bring on anybody that can talk about the NBA, but one of the things that attracted me, or me to you and bringing you on the program, was your passion. You've talked about that. So where does that passion come from? Is that something you were born with? Is something that you observed and that's how you decided to live your life? Where's the Scott Fields passion come from?
I think it's just an internal fire, and looking back at it now at 47 years old, the game I feel was taken away from me, and for me to sit and coach and have a lifestyle where I'm traveling the globe, and the house that we live in, we were blessed to have that house because of my livelihood of coaching. And that fire came because I couldn't play anymore. I wanted to stay involved in the game any way I could, so it was to teach. And so if I see a young man that has all this talent that may have a poor work ethic, I'm going to pull him aside and have a one-on-one with him and be like, you don't realize how blessed you are. Mm-hmm. You have a healthy mind, healthy body, but you just don't have the right attitude. And I'm going to call him on it. I'm going to hold him accountable, because I'll tell him, hey, I at one time was a great player too, but it was taken away. This could be the very last game you ever play. You don't know that. So you need to maximize on this day, because you never know when your career is going to end. And so why not take advantage of this? You know what? Then we humble them we'll go out to a hospital and visit these individuals that are in wheelchairs, like they said I would be, or we see these people who are battling with leukemia or cancer, or that wasn't their choice. They're in that hospital on IVs, getting chemotherapy. And that's a humbling experience, because those kids sitting in that wheelchair, those kids in that hospital would love to hear an applause one time. They would love to hear their name called in front of hundreds of people just one time and hear their sneaker squeak. They'll never have that opportunity. They live through those guys, and these people don't even realize how fortunate they are to have that opportunity to be paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to do what they love. And I can remember my grandpa telling me, he always called me Scotty or Hoss. He'd say, Hoss, it's just a game. And I'd be like, no, it's not just a game. This is what I love. He's like, they're paying you to go coach in some foreign country. It's just a game. He says, back in 1950, whatever, he said, we were just playing high school ball and it's just a game. Well, when you get down to it, yeah, it is just a game. But you know what? It's something that can be taken away from you like that, and you never know it. So you know what? This woes me attitude that you have because maybe you're feeling bad for yourself for whatever reason that you've got going on, it's something that you've built up in your mind, fix it. You're the only one who can fix it. It's a choice. It's a decision. And I think a lot of that passion comes from that, because it's like, I would still love to be out there performing and playing, but you know what? This is now my tool, and I'm going to help you be better than what you are today. So that's where it all comes from. It's just, I love it. It's I hope that it oozes from me, because it truly is what I love. I love the competitive spirit. I love all the strategic, the analysis. And it's funny because you hear all these NBA teams now that have all the quantitative analysis and the statistics. And it's funny because years ago, before all that stuff was ever popular and before it was ever called, quantitative analytics, and, you hear about Moneyball in baseball.
Sure.
We were doing that because I designed a handbook years ago in Europe where I held players accountable, and we would break down video and we would show the video in front of the players, and there was a positive hustle point system and a negative hustle point system. I always showed them after every game. I always took the time, and I always said that there won't be a coach that will outwork me or out-prepare us, and I'm going to show you why. And then I always backed it up with, after every game, it didn't matter if we played 80 games that year, they were going to get an individual evaluation after every game and show them the positive things that they did well, the negative things that they needed to correct. And then as a group, we took each one of those individuals And we combined all of it to see where we were at. Did we meet our team goals on that day? And it showed them exactly what they did, what they didn't do, how many times they missed a block out, how many times they didn't have defensive transition. Because, I've always said the most important part of the basketball court is free throw line to free throw line. If they're not sprinting from free throw line to free throw line, they're probably going to get beat. And it's just a concentration game to keep them focused. So if you can make it a game within the game and make teaching points, it's just like shooting a free throw. Players can sit there and shoot a free throw and either they're going to make or miss, right? No, challenge them, make it a game within the game. I sit there and tell the guys that I work with, you want the perfect shot every time. So when you're shooting, you should go for the perfect swish. That means not touching any rim. That would be worth 5 points. A 4-point free throw would be if you hit the back of the rim and in. A 3-point free throw would be if you hit the side of the rim and in. A 2-point free throw would be if you hit the front of the rim and it went in. And so if you break it down into 5 segments on one simple free throw, then you're forcing yourself to concentrate and go for the perfect free throw every time. Your percentage is going to go up just by you paying attention to that detail. And so all of a sudden, you go from a 68% free throw shooter to an 87% free throw shooter, and they've made progress, and now you're showing them why they need to do it that way. And it's effective, and that's what I do.
Love the passion.
Yeah.
Alema Harrington.